hope you all enjoyed that conversation. We're going to switch it up just for a little minute, and we're going to have an announcement, which we're very excited about, from one of Concordia's partners, Prosper Africa, which is a presidential-level national security initiative aimed at strengthening the strategic and economic partnership between the U.S. and Africa by catalyzing transformative two-way trade investment flows. It's my pleasure to welcome on stage British Robinson, Hamid Asseffar, Hannah Gore-Randall, and Isabella de Costa Mendes.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to Concordia for hosting such a dynamic summit. I am pleased to be here again today for a very exciting announcement. As the moderator said, I'm British Robinson, the coordinator of Prosper Africa. Again, Prosper Africa is a U.S. presidential level initiative formed to catalyze two-way trade and investment between the United States and Africa. We do that by mobilizing instruments, services, and resources across 17 U.S. government agencies, one of which was just here, Rita Jo Lewis, head of the Ex-Im Bank. Prosper Africa is established to empower businesses, investors with market insights, risk mitigation, deal support, and financing opportunities alongside our 17 government agency partners. Simply put, our role at Prosper Africa is to enable and help African nations fully integrate into global capital markets. One of the key pillars of Prosper Africa's investment program is providing catalytic contributions to fund managers that are driving more mainstream investment into Africa. Private capital is absolutely critical to closing the multi-trillion-dollar investment gap that is needed to achieve climate and sustainable development goals across the developing world, but most critically in Africa, where 35 of the 50 countries most at risk for climate change effects are located. Unfortunately, the development finance system as a whole currently just provides 5% of the $4.5 trillion annual investment needed in developing countries to achieve these global objectives. At the same time, mainstream private assets globally have grown exponentially across the world to over $400 trillion. These massive pools of capital have become the most underutilized resource base on the globe, despite their growing appetite for higher financial, social, environmental returns in emerging and frontier markets. If just 1% of these assets were invested in Africa, we would close the investment gaps entirely, leveraging the scale and sophistication of a whole new set of actors. So today, I am absolutely honored, along with my colleagues here on the stage, to take a step, albeit small, but we think is pretty big, towards filling that investment gap. Prosper Africa is proud to announce the award of two $5 million catalytic contributions to investment firms whose strategies are focused on resilient infrastructure and adaptation finance in Africa and the developing world. With Impacta Global Strategy and Invesco Climate Adaptation Action Fund. Thank you for your partnership. Our contributions will act as first loss tranche, helping to crowd in new institutional investors that would typically shy away from emerging market and Africa-focused investments. Together with U.S. and international institutional investor communities, we expect these two awards will catalyze over $800 million in private capital. That's an 80x leverage on the U.S. taxpayer dollar. I'd like to introduce our first awardee, Hamid Asseffar, Head of Europe, Middle East, and Africa Sustainable and Impact Investing at Invesco. Hamid?
Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank Coordinator British Robinson and the Prosper Africa team for your leadership and for these catalytic contribution awards, which I do believe will drive and support the transition and sustainable growth in Africa. African countries and many other emerging and developing economies require significant investments to adapt their infrastructure and also other key parts of their economies to counterbalance the physical effects of climate change. They also need to develop their capital markets to attract the international private capital much needed to transition towards sustainable and resilient economies in this decade. At Invesco, we have conceptualized an innovative blended finance strategy leveraging the growth of the green, social, and sustainable debt markets to support and unlock climate adaptation and resilience opportunities in developing world, while tilting the allocations over time towards the most vulnerable regions to climate change, such as least developed countries and Africa. Blended finance as a structuring approach through an efficient use of capital from public development finance institutions such as Prosper Africa, coupled with technical assistance, will help mitigate the higher perceived risks associated with those climate-related investment in the developing world. I do believe that through financial innovation, collaboration between the private and public sector, and also education to institutional clients, we can all collectively address this big challenge of private capital mobilization and channel more capital towards the continent. And for that, we are grateful again for the collaboration and partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamid, and again, thank you for your partnership. Now I'd like to introduce our second awardee, Isabella da Costa Mendes, co-CEO of Impacta Global, a woman-led emerging market infrastructure debt investor, and Hannah Gore-Randall, Managing Director of Alternative Finance at Legal & General, a global private and public markets asset manager and existing partner of Impacta Global, having committed up to $100 million to their strategy. Thank you for your partnership. Hannah?
Thank you, British. We're delighted to be here, and it's a pleasure to share the stage with Hamid as well. Impacta Global has 4 partners with a lot in common. We have 4 women who spent over 25 years in emerging markets, credit and infrastructure, and observing the financing gaps and the opportunities of the asset classes. We set up Impacta to finance climate mitigation and adaptation projects within renewable energy, health, water, sanitation, and sustainable mobility. We know that financing sustainable infrastructure is the most important challenge ahead of us, and yet not enough capital is flowing. Infrastructure debt in emerging markets as an asset class is resilient, delivers consistent and attractive risk-adjusted returns. But at the same time, it delivers a very meaningful impact to local communities, providing a crucial contribution to the reduction of inequalities and economic empowerment to the most vulnerable, who very often are women. The challenges presented by climate change require significant capital mobilization from the private sector. DFIs cannot do it alone. An additional $500 to $600 billion per year are required of private capital to help emerging markets countries address their Paris Agreement commitments. Mobilizing this capital requires, as Hamid also mentioned, addressing some of the private sector's misconceptions about risk in emerging markets, and in particular in Africa, and requires a smarter way to match public and private capital. At Impacta, we're very proud to have the backing of Legal & General, and Hannah will speak in a minute, who are leading the way not only in doing what is right for the planet, but also seizing the investment opportunity that the asset class presents. Prosper Africa has, since its inception, obviously, been instrumental in bridging gaps and connecting international capital to the African continent. We are proud to be the recipient of such an important award. For us, working with Prosper Africa in this innovative structure will help unlock significant and much needed private capital for the continent and beyond. in emerging markets, addressing climate challenges, reducing inequalities, and creating jobs. They do go hand in hand, and financing sustainable infrastructure in these regions will address all three challenges at the same time. Thank you, British. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today representing Legal & General alongside our partners Impacta Global as we announce Prosper Africa's $5 million award into Impacta strategy. Legal & General is one of the UK's leading financial services groups, established 190 years ago with around $1.5 trillion in assets under management worldwide. This endorsement by Prosper Africa is a significant milestone in our partnership with Impacta, as it underscores our collective commitment to fostering sustainable growth and driving the climate transition in emerging markets. At Legal & General, through our GP Stake Investing program, we've spent the past decade backing innovative alternative asset managers who are operating in sectors that will benefit from long-term structural growth, creating a finance opportunity that institutional capital can naturally help to fill. We firmly believe that to be serious about the climate transition, there must be more institutional solutions for financing the transition in emerging markets. We see this as an unprecedented opportunity for institutional investors, but investors often get stuck demonstrating that structural protections are in place for their capital and that the right capability is in place to manage emerging market risk. That is why we partnered with Impacta Global, a specialist team dedicated to the provision of financing in emerging markets, and have committed up to $100 million to their strategy alongside Prosper Africa. Impacta's strategy to deliver positive financial, social, and environmental outcomes aligns with our own, creating opportunities for institutional capital to achieve attractive and resilient returns, while also playing a critical role in supporting the climate transition in some of the world's most underserved regions. As we look to the future, the need to finance the global energy transition has never been more urgent. Today's commitment from Prosper Africa supports our shared ambition to bring sustainable growth and climate resilience in emerging markets to the forefront of global investment. Thank you, and I'll now hand back to British Robinson.
Thank you, Isabella and Hannah. Again, we are so proud of this partnership and these awards, and none of this would have been possible without our incredible visionary investment lead, Cameron Kojahari. Cameron, thank you for your work on this. It's truly brilliant. These Catalytic Contribution Awards are an excellent reflection of our investment work at Prosper and Cameron's leadership and its potential to achieve scale and crowd in more mainstream private sector actors. The United States has reached a tipping point in our commercial and economic relationship with Africa. It is time we move to real investment in that relationship. This is a clear example of us just doing just that. We look forward to continuing our work with companies like Invesco and Impacta and Legal & General and the broader institutional investor community on ways to develop market-driven initiatives to drive economic growth and development in Africa. And we always welcome new partners. The end state for the US government is very clear. African nations must have the tools to chart their own development journey through free and transparent markets. We at Prosper Africa are proud to be a part of that journey so that Africa can continue to prosper. Thank you.